I have not written unto you because ye know not the truth, but because ye know it, and that no lie is of the truth. Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, that denieth the Father and the Son. So as we get into here tonight about the Antichrist and building on the right foundation in the future, these are two of the uses of the word Antichrist just right here in 1 John chapter 2. And then look over in chapter 4 and verse 3. Chapter 4 and verse 3. And every spirit... let's go back and let's start reading verse 1. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. And then we're going to backtrack then to, again, back to 1 John in just a moment. But look at 2 John 1, the only chapter in 2 John in verse 7. 2 John and verse 7, for many deceivers are entered into the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. And so what we'll see is, if you go back to 1 John chapter 2, it says, little children, it is the last time. And as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. And so he's saying, here's something that's going to be a characteristic of the age, in which you've heard that Antichrist shall come, and that's the man of sin that is spoken of elsewhere in the Bible, and the son of perdition. But he says, you've heard that Antichrist shall come. So speaking of a singular Antichrist, of someone who is someone who's prophesied to be here in the future, but right now there are even many Antichrists. Well, what are the characteristics of the Antichrist? Well, an Antichrist is an opposer or an imposter of Christ. And we see that here in these verses that particularly in 1 John 4 and verse 3, when it says, every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is that spirit of Antichrist. And it says it's already in the world. The spirit of Antichrist is alive and well in the world. Now, there's a lot of fascination. When's Antichrist going to come, or who's the Antichrist going to be? Some people think, some people thought Barack Obama was the Antichrist. Some people thought Donald Trump was the Antichrist. Some people think that Bill Gates is the Antichrist, or some people would say just fill in the blank. There's all kinds of you could fill in a number of people, but as far as what people would say. But an Antichrist is an opposer or an imposter of Christ, and that's what we see in 1 John 4:3 and 2 John 1:7. It's what do they teach and what do they believe about Jesus Christ? And they teach it has to do with Him coming in the flesh, so it's either that, oh yes, there was a man here, but he was not the Christ, or we don't believe in Him at all. So it all goes back to what do they believe about Jesus Christ. And so anything that deviates from the biblical truth of who Jesus Christ is and Him coming in the flesh it falls under the category of Antichrist, because it's opposing the correct doctrine of Christ. So as an opposer or someone who sits in the place of Christ, an imposter of Christ, this is probably, I don't know how, it's not necessarily relevant to us personally, but it's one that I was aware of and I heard about. Someone gave me a little booklet, I think, or some sort of literature, and this person did not believe these things, but she gave me a few years ago this literature of, I had never heard of it before, but there's a religion called Happy Science. Happy Science. And it's basically kind of like a modern repackaging of Buddhism in certain ways, but Happy Science, and this is directly from the Happy Science website, but I want to show you, and the whole reason of reading this to you is not that Happy Science has any personal relevance to our own lives, but to show you an example of how the spirit of Antichrist is alive and well in this world, and that there are many Antichrists. Happy science believers have a strong faith in the God of the earth, El Kantari. A part of him was born as Shakyamuni Buddha. In the Old Testament, El Kantari is known as Elohim, and he also represents the ancient legend of the Tree of Life. All religions originally came from one source, El Kantari, and that the being that designed this world with love. A part of El Kantari resides with Master Okawa. This is the guy who started this happy science religion. They call him Master Okawa. And is guiding humanity to create a world of harmony and prosperity. Now, you think about that. That's an insult to the God of the Bible when you're saying, well, this is that God of the earth. A part of him was born as Shakyamuni Buddha. Then in the Old Testament, El Kantari is known as Elohim. So this God is known in different times, in different places, in different ways, as different names. And now part of him resides with Master Okawa. This is the one we need to follow. And that's a classic. I mean, it's almost too easy on a silver platter of an example of an Antichrist. I mean, oftentimes it's more subtle than that, but there are some obvious ones out there as far as who is an Antichrist. And here's the subtle part. And you might not necessarily see, well, these people aren't really Antichrist, because aren't they saying they believe in the God of the Bible and they believe in Jesus Christ, and aren't they leading people? But when you actually see what they teach and the direction they're leading people, they are Antichrist, because what they're doing, what they're teaching is actually opposing the things of God. So, and for example, is another danger as far as the spirit of Antichrist are the cults of personality who are led by people who claim to hear from God and believe the Bible. But yet it's a cult of personality, and there's a lot of contemporary modern churches that are cults of personality. What's a cult of personality? It's that people are following a person. It's that this person has a certain way about them. They speak a certain way. Maybe they're a charismatic type of personality. Maybe they're very photogenic. Maybe they're just very appealing in the way they come across. Maybe they're very smooth talking. And so people follow them not because of the truth that they say they are teaching, not because of their teaching, but because it's them as a person. It's them as a personality, and they have such a personality that can attract a following. Now, I guess this is probably good for me. I don't have that personality. So if anybody's going to come to this church, it's hopefully because you maybe like people here, like being here, but also that you actually think you're hearing the truth from God's Word too. Because you're not going to get some cult of personality, and I'm not very photogenic, so I just don't fit the bill for that. So that's probably a good thing. But I'm going to give a few examples. A couple of weeks ago, I picked on Joel Osteen and mentioning about him being a creep. And I realized it was unfair because he's the easy pickings one, but there are others. If I were to mention any names, I should mention other names. And so these guys would actually fall under creeps as well, not just... Really, I think Antichrist, because they're leading people astray. They're not preaching just the solid, plain gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, they say they believe the gospel, but when you listen to what their teachings are, well, they're not teaching people Bible doctrine. They're teaching their philosophies. They're teaching self-help. They're teaching all these things. And it's all about them. It's all about their following and their brand, so to speak. So one guy, and he's really, really popular. I forgot to check how many subscribers and views their YouTube videos get, but this guy's got this mega church in North Carolina, maybe multi-campuses or whatever, but his name is Stephen Furtick. Stephen Furtick. Anybody hear of Stephen Furtick? No? Okay. Stephen Furtick is very, very popular. He's a younger guy. He dresses like a real cool, trendy guy, and apparently in very expensive clothes too. I mean, really expensive. He's very rich too. I mean, he's made a lot of money. Oh, but it's all about the brand, and it's all about he's and the guy's a world-class narcissist. I mean, just high on himself, so full of himself. But what these guys do in these churches, there's kind of this little network, and what they do is they invite each other to speak at each other's places, and then they can kind of butter each other up. So they're not bragging on themselves. It's just they kind of have this little good old boys club where they just brag on the other. Oh, they're so wonderful. Oh, we need to follow the vision of this person. And it's in a cultic manner where it's all about they're getting the revelation from the Lord. We need to follow their vision. Oh, we look to our fearless leader, basically. Now, the Bible teaches there needs to be leadership in the church, but it's not a cult of personality type of leadership. And so he's one of them, and just some very just false doctrine, and he's one that's a major. His church is called Elevation Church. But if I looked at some of his message titles, and it's all about you. It's all about you. Just this motivational, self-help type of stuff. They're not teaching Bible doctrine. What they do is they have this self-help type of thing, this motivational, and then what they do is they take some stories in the Bible and they inject it into what they want to say. So it sounds like they're teaching the Bible, but really they're just using the Bible to support their motivational speech and the self-help. And so he's one. Another one is Brian Houston from Hillsong. Brian Houston from Hillsong. And you want to talk about a cult of, it's not really personality, because it's not just all about him, but Hillsong, he used to be, I believe, part of the Assemblies of God, and then I don't know if they had either, for whatever reason, he separated from them, and now Hillsong itself is its own entity, organization. Now they've fallen on some hard times. They've had some scandal in various things. Both they're out of Australia, but they also, the guy that he had there as the pastor in Hillsong, New York, they had to dismiss him because of some scandal there. And then I think one in maybe Houston, Texas, I think. Another place, or maybe Dallas, they had a problem there. And I mean, there's just some problem. I mean, but it's a complete counterfeit of Bible Christianity. Because it's all about the people. It's all about the leaders, the cult of personality. And they claim to hear from God, so you can't question them because they're the ones who hear from God. They're the ones who get the revelations from God. And they know just enough of the Bible to be dangerous. And then the other one, which I think is probably, you make the case of Antichrist play organization, would be Bill Johnson in Bethel Church of Redding, California. And the reason for that is there's literally stuff going on there that's like New Age type of things that they're really into. And that's spreading in a lot of different these contemporary churches, but there it's even more evident. Stephen Furtick's church, I mean, it's just all about, hey, pump you up, and it's all about us. We're so, yeah. And then, by the way, and so one of Stephen Furtick's favorite people is T.D. Jakes, who has some doctrinal problems of his own. So he'll have T.D. Jakes come, the Bishop T.D. Jakes. And so T.D. Jakes, at one point a couple years ago, at some point in the recent past, he gave Stephen Furtick a statue of David because he's comparing him to a David. And I mean, it's just all about glorification of man and idolatry and the cult of personality. You say, well, how's that Antichrist? Because it's distracting people and diverting people from sound doctrine and from the doctrines of Jesus Christ. They're not preaching the gospel. You could look at maybe their statement of faith on their website. Oh, I looked at Elevation Church. Oh, yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff on there that looks right. I mean, but then you listen to his messages. He's not preaching the doctrine that's contained in their statement of faith. It's a bunch of fluff. It's a bunch of other stuff. And so what they're doing is they're funneling people away from just the simple truth of sound doctrine, and they're getting them part of these huge mega organizations and inoculating them to sound doctrine. Now that's Antichrist in a more of an indirect way, but it's in a lot of ways an imposter. It's a counterfeit of the real thing. Even though they say, oh, we believe in the God of the Bible, but they're leading people down the wrong path. So those are just three of the bigger names. So we'll leave Joel Osteen, aside today. We'll let him off easy. But then of course is the previous example I gave. Then there's some that are just direct antichrists. They're just directly antichrist. But then there's others who are being used by that spirit of antichrist to lead people astray. Antichrist is also known as the beast. Turn to Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. And by the way, you could even go further, more explicit as far as those who claim to be Christians in these churches, when it's so-called progressive Christianity, that's permeated with the spirit of Antichrist because they are opposing the truth. They're opposing the truth. The Antichrist is also known as the beast. Revelation 11 and verse 7, it says, when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. And we're not delving into the events during this time tonight so much. The focus is on Antichrist himself. And then turn to Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13. And we'll spend more time in this passage. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1 says, And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Now that's significant because actually in Daniel there's a description of different kingdoms that are illustrated by these different animals. So this Antichrist, this particular beast, is really the culmination. It's a wrapping up of all of those major kingdoms of the world. The empires that were back in history that the Bible describes. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And what you see later in Revelation is the dragon is the devil, the old serpent, the devil. So this person's being empowered by the devil, this beast. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And that phrase fascinates me because even today, the world wonders after a lot of things. The world wonders after a lot of things. There's maybe a new something that gets just bombarded throughout the news, and the attention of the world goes to this. Wow, what's going on here? What is happening during these days? And there's that wonder that takes place, and so the whole world. It says all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with a sword must be killed with a sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And that number, the number of a man, when you have that triple, 3 sixes, that's extra power behind the number when you add those digits. The second beast is the false prophet, and I'll show you that here keep your finger there, and we'll come right back, but turn to Revelation 19. Revelation 19 and verse 19 and 20. Revelation 19, verse 19. I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And so there's the beast and the false prophet that wrought miracles before him. Before meaning in front, as far as pointing people to that beast, causing people to worship him. So if you go back to Revelation 13, we'll see that Antichrist worship will accompany devil worship. And so there's the reason for the title. He's Antichrist because he's completely and utterly opposed to the things of God, and that's the heart and soul of what the devil's all about, is being opposed to God and his order and his system, and he then sets up his own plan. All right, God's got his plan for Jesus to rule and reign on this earth, and so, but the devil in the process, oh, you know what, I can do that too. I'm going to have my own system and you know, the devil knows he's got a short time. The devil, there's a level of knowledge of his sealed fate, but yet at the same time self-deception. And even if he's got a knowledge of his sealed fate, the devil's so rebellious that it doesn't matter what his sealed fate is. I mean, he's just bound and determined, I'm going to do this. But you know what's so great though is here's the devil with this very elaborate world system, getting ready to set up the kingdom of Antichrist, going on for thousands of years. He's the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that worketh in the children of disobedience. Here he is, setting up this kingdom, getting ready for Antichrist to take over. And in the end, all he's doing is playing into God's hands. Now, isn't that a great thought? All he's doing is playing into God's hands, because then what's going to happen? Well, God's going to take care of them. God's going to judge them. God's going to wipe them out. God's going to destroy them. And so in the end, yeah, he's gone to all this trouble, but, oh yeah, here, thank you. Now I'm just going to finish my plan, and Jesus is going to rule and reign. What a great thought. What a great thing. What a great truth. That God is the one He's over it all anyway. It should be no surprise that we are seeing a greater instances of devil worship. It's just the heart of rebellion against God and His Word. Just it's darkness. It's a love of darkness rather than light. And that's been that way for millennia. But unfortunately, here in the United States, we see a greater prevalence of it. It's already alive and well in many other countries. Pagan religions go back to the time of Genesis and the mystery religions and all of those things. But it says that they worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. So it wasn't just worshiping the beast. I mean, they're worshiping the dragon. It's devil worship. And that is what is behind the spirit of Antichrist, is the rebellion of the devil. So is the reason for the title, Antichrist, because he's an opposer or an impostor of Christ. Second, we see the characteristics and duration of Antichrist's rule. Turn to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. Daniel 7 and verse 1 says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And after this I beheld, lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue at the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were like eyes of the man, like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels are as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were open. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Now here's the challenging thing about the Bible prophecy, because, and especially in Daniel, what you see in other prophetic books, but here we're in Daniel, is there are prophecies relating to that more immediate time period of what would come after that. And so, for example, these beasts that are rising up would signify the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire with Antiochus Epiphanes, who would have been a forerunner to Antichrist. He would have been a type of Antichrist. And then after that, the Roman Empire. And so there's the immediate prophecy regarding those kingdoms. But then, all of a sudden, it takes a turn, and you're talking about the Ancient of Days sitting, whose garment was white as snow. And so then you see talking about a reference to Christ and His dominion and His kingdom. So then you're looking out even farther. The 10 horns, let's go to verse 19, go down to verse 19. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Stout has to do with authoritative. And you know who I thought of? And I'm not saying he's Antichrist or even a type of Antichrist, but I thought about a stout look at Donald Trump. He just has a certain look to his face where he gets this real, like he's serious, he's determined, he's, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So here we are talking about Christ's reign, ruling and reigning with His saints in the kingdom. That hasn't happened yet. So we have, on one hand, speaking of a type of Antichrist, who would be Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the Grecian Empire. And what's beneficial to us, we can actually look back and see those things that have happened in history. So we're not from Daniel looking forward. We can actually look back and see, all right, here, now we just sift through, okay, what's actually been fulfilled, what's speaking of, what has already taken place in history. But then what is very clearly not happened yet. And the Ancient of Days has not come and set up His kingdom. The judgment has not been given to the saints of the Most High, and the saints have not possessed the kingdom yet. Thus He said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. Matches Revelation, 3.5 years. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And let's see if I wanted to even read that far. Yes. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom unto the whole, under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. I love those little endings to some of his visions. He's getting loaded up with visions. He is getting loaded up with revelation into the future. And I mean, think about what you would do. You'd be kind of troubled. Wait a minute, wow, this is a lot of stuff that's going to happen here. Wow. But the 10 horns signify the 10 kings of the earth related to the revived Roman Empire. Now that fourth kingdom being the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire doesn't exist in the same form it did back then. At the same time, the whole spirit of the Roman Empire still exists. Same spirit, there's still the same things in the background are operating. And this revived empire will be ruled by Antichrist. Now here's the thing about this. I don't claim to know for sure, okay, who are these 10 horns? What are some people have said the European Union is the revived Roman Empire. I think it's bigger than that. I don't think it's just European Union. By the way, for now, there's more than 10 nations in the European Union. It doesn't mean at some point there won't be back down to 10. So European Union, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. Some have said, now I like this. This is me personally. I've liked this idea. It's just an idea, but it makes a lot of sense, is that there will be 10 different regional governments around the world. So you have the European Union. You've got Russia. They're trying to start the Eurasian Economic Union. You've got the ASEAN, A-S-E-A-N, I think the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or something like that. You've got this, there's an African Union. There's a South American Union. I don't know if it's called that. We don't necessarily yet have a North American Union per se in name, but there's a natural, the way the European Union started was with economic unity, and then it morphed more into political unity, and there's still a lot of division within the European Union because their own governments still have a lot of sway as far as what they do. But then there are other things being part of that union that they're expected to follow, but still not a lot of teeth, and not as much teeth there yet. Now, how does that tie into Great Britain leaving the European Union? I have no idea. Who knows? Like I said, it's just an idea. But that's one of the ideas I've heard, and it's very compelling, but I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. So there are all kinds of things. We just know that these are, there's 10 horns and 10 kings, and 3 of them get rooted up. So something happens there that they're not all maybe unified. Maybe 3 of them want to go their own way, have some other ideas. So there's a lot we still maybe don't know all the particulars of, but the Bible does give us a good framework of what we're dealing with. So there's that's part of the duration here we see, and also some of the characteristics of it. Turn to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. Daniel 9 and verse 27. Talking about Daniel's 70th week, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. This is the 70th week. We've covered, actually were this passage last week. The Daniel's 70th week, that's that 7 years, and who's confirming the covenant with the many? Well, it's talking about the prince that shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, some people say, well, these things have already happened. The temple's already been destroyed, so this is talking about Rome. Well, once again, there are prophecies that pertain, or part of the prophecies that pertain to some things that have already happened in the past. And as they say, history doesn't really repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And throughout history, there have been many antichrists. The devil has had somebody ready to go. There's always been somebody who's been out for world domination. There's always been somebody who's been out for world domination. Whether it was Hitler, whether it was those that go farther back, some of the emperors, some of the, you talk about Alexander the Great, you talk about, there's always been somebody out for world domination. And this 70th week, it speaks of unto the end of the war. And so the 70th week caused the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of the abominations he shall make it desolate until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. This 70th week is described in Matthew chapter 24. Turn to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. Now, the way that this gets started is regarding the temple. The disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus says, there shall be not left here one stone upon another that should not be thrown down. So he's prophesying that more immediate in the years to come, that destruction of the temple. But notice then the disciples came and they said, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Well, the time when the temple was destroyed in AD 70 was not the time when Jesus came back. But they're asking him now something even further out, or at least in their minds, maybe they're thinking that destruction that was going to take place would have been the end of the world. But we're going farther out now. We're not just talking about when the Romans, what the Romans did. We're going even farther, talking about the end of the world, sign of thy coming, the end of the world. Verse 4, and Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So certainly those things have already happened. These things have already happened in the past. There's things that are still happening today. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another, and many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. By the way, that's not a salvation verse of having to endure with your salvation. It's not about working for your salvation. Oh, you got to endure, you got to persevere so you can be saved. It has to do with going through that time of trouble. If they are those who endure through it, those who endure to the end, there will be deliverance. They will be delivered. God's going to deliver them. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then... So someone says, sometimes it said, this is just talking about what happened back in the days of the Romans. That's what this is talking about. Now, perhaps it will be some history repeating itself. Just that some of these things may have happened when the Romans destroyed the temple and Jerusalem, and all of those things took place. But notice what it says in verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now that's something farther in the future. That's something we see in Revelation, because what goes on in Revelation is the greatest type of tribulation when God pours out His wrath upon the people of the earth at that time. And there's great tribulation also for the saints at that time because of the Antichrist program, those who get saved during that period of time. You have, first of all, the two witnesses, and there's the 144,000 Jews that witness, they get saved and witness. And so there'll be saints on the earth at that time, and they'll go through a great time of tribulation. And then halfway through that 3.5 years, it's initially this Antichrist comes as a man of peace, and we're not going to be able to get into everything here tonight, and that's already being very clear based on the notes I have left. But let's, we may have to, let's go to one more passage, 2 Thessalonians. We've got a little ways to go, so 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Still talking about the Antichrist, the man of sin, chapter 2 and verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there shall come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so this 70th week, this 7 years, when you get partway through, yes, the Antichrist has that 3.5 years to work with, and then it's revealed for who he really is, because he commits the abomination of desolation there in the temple. And it's that second half, and once again, this is not about the 7 years tonight, but the second half that then the majority of God's wrath, that great tribulation, gets poured out on the earth. But he sits in the temple showing himself that he is God. But we see that the Holy Spirit is the restrainer. He who now letteth will let, and he'll be taken out of the way. Then the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And so there have been antichrists in the past. There have been attempts to set up the king. There have been desolations. There have been blasphemies. There's been persecution of the Jewish people. But so everything that has taken place throughout history up to this point, and then what will still take place up until that point of that 7 years, all of that is going to be all wrapped up. It's the culmination of that is that 7 years. The culmination of that is that here's the real deal. Here is the Antichrist. He's empowered by the devil. By the way, Hitler was empowered by the devil. I mean, there are people who have been inspired by the devil, filled with the devil. That doesn't mean they are the Antichrist. It just means they were an Antichrist. Yeah. I mean, when you do some of the atrocities that, when someone does some of the atrocities that some of these leaders have done over the years, I mean, they're filled with the devil. I mean, you could say Hitler, you could say Mao Zedong, Mussolini, Pol Pot. There's all kinds of ones throughout history that have just been filled with the devil. And the Antichrist and that false prophet is going to be the culmination of all of that. That the real deal. And so right now we're in that time of that. There's the spirit of Antichrist that gets stronger and stronger and stronger as you get closer and closer to that time. And by the way, my belief is that the Pope is probably, is the Pope the Antichrist? I would say the Pope is probably the false prophet, and then leads people to the worship of the beast. But then what we see is actually, and we'll get into this, I think we'll get into this a little bit next time, is that mystery Babylon the Great, the religious Babylon, the great harlot, actually gets destroyed. And so what does all that look like? Prophecy is a whole lot easier to identify once it already happened. So are we going to figure out should we try to figure out every little jot and tittle and make these predictions? No, I don't think so. But I think what we should do is and this is the challenge with prophecy, because it spreads so much throughout the Bible, to be able to put everything together, put it in its proper place and context. That's always been the challenge, and that's why there's so many different viewpoints of prophecy. Well, I think this means this, and I think this fits here and there. But the way to start is you put the structure in place. What the Bible says, you put the pieces in place. And then over time, as you study the Bible more and you fill things in, and as you get closer and closer, especially the age in which we live now, we can then see more and more, oh wow, this really, I see the Bible already predicted this. And then we trust that that structure that God has put into place, or I should say, trust in God that, yes, the details will be filled in. And the longer we go on, we can see more of the details filled in. But as we focused on last week and regarding the rapture, I'm thankful that God is over all of it, that all of this that's going on, the spirit of Antichrist that's in the world today, is all playing into part of God's plan. It all plays into God's bigger plan. And it's not getting past God. It's not, oh boy, what's going on? Wait a minute. I can't believe the world's getting so wicked, or I can't believe people are worshiping the devil, or I can't believe, boy, is this precursor to the mark of the beast? Well, the Bible says there's going to be something. It's not surprising to see those little incremental steps that are getting us there. And I did not have this passage down for tonight, but also at the end of Daniel, it talks about many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And we live in that day as well. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And so we see those indications. Wow, we're building up more and more momentum to that time. So what do we do here in this life right now? Well, we do the same things that people have done, Christians have done for thousands of years, is we stay faithful to the Lord. We engage in that spiritual battle. We do recognize that there is a spiritual battle, because it's all going to be culminating in those final battles, when Jesus Christ wipes out all his enemies, and the saints rule with him. And so in the meantime, we engage in that battle because it's the battle for men's souls. There's the battle for the minds of men and women, the hearts of men and women. And we need to engage in that in our own lives, realizing it's going to get more intense. It's going to get more challenging. The battle gets more intense. But God is the one that all plays into His plan anyway. And so we can just be faithfully following and serving the one whose true plan is going to be the culmination of the true plan, the biggest plan. Not the devil's plan. Yeah, his plan will have a culmination to it, but God's plan has a bigger culmination. It comes to the end. It reaches its peak in the climax of God fulfilling what the Bible says He's going to fulfill. So we don't need to be shaken. We don't need to be stirred by the times in which we live. We can be faithful to the Lord, trusting in the days of the spirit of Antichrist. But we also need to be discerning, be cautious, and be aware of the great deception that is out there. Because there are many who would lead astray. There are the false prophets that the Bible speaks about. Then there are those who are just blatantly opposed to Christ. But we need to be discerning. We need to have wisdom. We need to stay extra committed to the Word of God, to walking with God, and going forward in the Christian life.